Hello and welcome back to the Formula 1.5 season for 2014. My name is Alex Does F1 Stuff and this will be part 2 for the Formula 1.5 season for 2014. So if you have not seen my first video where I covered the first half of the season, I'll pop a little card in the corner for that video, and then there is also a video along with that one which I think I released before, if I remember rightly, where I go over exactly how I have created my Formula 1.5 season. I will also pop that one in a card in the corner as well. So without further ado, we will jump straight in and start where we left off. Does that make sense? Start where you left off, leave where we left off, start... No, it would be start where we left off. So we will move straight on into round number 12 in Belgium. And qualifying will always start us off, and let's begin with Q1. So Q1 starts with the two Caterhams of Ericsson and their new driver Lotterer on the back row. Gutierrez and Chilton are next for 13th on the grid, with Hulkenberg down in 12th, in his bid to regain the championship lead behind Pastor Maldonado. Okay, that didn't quite make sense, but Pastor Maldonado is in front of Nico Hulkenberg. However, Pastor Maldonado is not trying to win the championship in front of Nico Hulkenberg. Jules Bianchi makes it through into Q2 in 10th behind the Lotus of Romain Grosjean in 9th. Perez in the second Force India could only manage P7, 7/10ths behind the two Toro Rosso teammates, with Kvyat ahead of Verne. And then finally Q3 for the Belgian Grand Prix. Button and Massa line up on the second row of the grid behind their two teammates of Magnussen and poleman Valtteri Bottas, who secures his sixth pole of the season and third in a row after coming back from the summer break. So taking a look at the starting grid, there are no penalties to be applied to anyone this time round. As we move to the race day around Spa, the longest track on the F1 calendar, let's see who secures the first victory in the second half of the season oh, I'm so lost. So the race opens with a retirement from Lotterer in the Caterham, and also Maldonado on the first lap, with Grosjean in the sister Lotus also failing to finish. Bianchi also comes to a stop with 5 laps to go. Ericsson and Chilton are the only two lapped, with the two Saubers ahead sneaking into the points-paying positions. Massa has a poor race, dropping from 3rd on the grid to 8th at the flag. Magnussen also goes backwards too. The two Toro Rossos and two Force Indias made good progress, coming in an alternating fashion, with Perez landing a podium in P3. Jenson Button secures 2nd, but Bottas storms to victory, 26 seconds clear of the Brit, to take his 5th win of the season. So the fastest lap goes to Adrian Sutil and the Sauber for the very first time this season, by just under a 10th of a second. So taking a look at the drivers' gains now, Bottas takes home another 25-point haul, with the Toro Rosso duo also picking up plenty of points to boot. The only real movements come from Massa and Perez swapping, along with the two Toro Rosso teammates as well. So Bottas now has a 30-point lead, a comfortable win margin over second place man Nico Hulkenberg. Magnussen is a long way back in 4th, with Perez and Massa close behind him. The two Toro Rossos and Grosjean form a trio above the midfield, but not quite at the top level, with Maldonado spearheading the bottom half of the grid. So looking at the constructors' gains now, it's all fairly even, with Williams gaining 29, Force India 25, McLaren 24 and Toro Rosso 20, with Sauber picking up 3. As for the constructor shuffles, there isn't any at all, so we will move straight to the differences. Williams now take a 21-point lead over Force India, who have McLaren 10 points back. 155 points now separates Toro Rosso from the top 3 teams, but they're 53 points clear from Lotus. Sauber move further from Marussia, with Caterham still at the bottom of the pack. So leaving Spa and Belgium and heading to Italy and Monza. Qualifying will always start us off for the race weekend, and we jump straight to Q1. It is a 6-man affair, with the two Marussia cars between the two Caterhams for the back 2 rows of the grid. The Lotus pair is next, with Maldonado ahead of Grosjean for 11th, with the Frenchman 1/10 behind. So Q2 opens with both the Saubers out, 3/10ths behind the Force India of Nico Hulkenberg, who needs a strong race at Monza here to get back to Bottas' tail for the championship. Kvyat is the lead Toro Rosso with Verne 800ths back in 7th. And as Q3 gets underway, Sergio Perez is the first driver down behind the two McLarens with Magnussen in front of Button this time. But it's another 1-2 qualifying run for Williams though, with Bottas on pole for the 4th time in a row. Looking at the starting grid, Danny Kvyat has a 10-place grid drop and Marcus Ericsson has to start from the pit lane. So let's get started with race day around the Temple of Speed. Max Chilton is the only retirement of the race on lap 5, with Gutierrez and Ericsson both finishing 2 laps down on the leader. Bianchi, Kobayashi and Grosjean are all lapped once, with Sutil in the Sauber and Maldonado in the other Lotus also being lapped, but they both made it into the points. Hulkenberg is sandwiched between the two Toro Rossos in 7th, with the two McLarens in front both slipping a place from where they started. Perez had a strong race around Monza, making it onto the podium from P5 on the grid, but it's another 1-2 victory for Williams, but Massa is at the head this time, getting his 2nd victory of the season. So along with the race win, Massa also takes home the fastest lap of the race. Looking towards the gains for the drivers after Monza now, Massa finally grabs some high points after a few inconsistencies, with Perez also gaining another 15 for his campaign to get back in the fight. There's only one shuffle with the drivers, and it comes from Massa moving above Perez and Magnussen up to P4 in the standings. So Bottas now has a 42-point lead over Hulkenberg now, with Button slowly closing the gap. Massa is 51 points behind the Brit, with Magnussen and Perez both 1 point behind him. Kvyat and Verne are in their own little battle for 7th, with Maldonado still spearheading the bottom of the pack. Williams again take all 43 points available to them this time round. McLaren bag 22, Force India 21, Toro Rosso 12, with the Lotus and Sauber also scoring. So as for shuffling, there isn't any, so we will jump straight into the differences. Williams' lead over Force India is now a solid 1-2 victory, with McLaren 9 points further back. Toro Rosso have a mammoth 165-point gap to the Woking team, with 64 points back to Lotus. Sauber is still leading the bottom 3 teams as well. So moving from the Temple of Speed in Monza, Italy, to under the lights at Singapore in the Marina Bay circuit. So as always, qualifying starts us off for the race weekend, and we will jump straight into Q1. Q1 sees the alternating quartet of the Caterhams and Marussias filling out the back 2 rows of the grid, with Chilton behind Bianchi and Kobayashi in front of Ericsson, with Maldonado and Sutil also out in Q1. As we look ahead to Q2, Grosjean squeezes himself in 2 tenths behind the Force India of Sergio Perez. Gutierrez and Hulkenberg are next, separated by 0.02 of a second, with Verne and Button out in front. And the final qualifying session around the Marina Bay circuit sees Danny Kvyat and Kevin Magnussen line up on the 2nd row of the grid, but it is yet another front row lockout for Williams, with Massa on pole ahead of his teammate Bottas. So as we take a little look towards the starting grid, there are no penalties to hand out again for the 3rd time this year. Looking ahead to the race around the grueling 60-lap Singapore circuit, which always runs up to the 2-hour broadcast limit. So in the race, Kobayashi fails to start, and it is followed by a double DNF for Sauber, and also a retirement for Jenson Button on lap 52. Chilton is the only driver having been lapped in 12th, with Bianchi 0.3 off a point-scoring place in 11th behind Ericsson. Kvyat slips back from his 4th place start and finishes 9th behind the 2 Lotus cars. Bottas had a poor race, finishing 6th, starting on the front row of the grid. The standout performance of this race was the 2 Force India cars, who finished 3rd and 4th, with Perez picking up another podium from their poor qualifying. Verne manages to make a sensational P2 finish though, behind the race leader of Massa, who takes his 2nd win in a row for Williams. But it was Magnussen who bagged the fastest lap for McLaren though, just over 1/10 of a second from Kvyat and 0.3 to Verne. Looking towards the drivers' gains now, Massa takes a big step forward to the top 3 with another 25 points, with the 2 Toro Rossos also scoring strongly as well, as they so often do. As for the shuffling, Magnussen slips to P6, And the Toro Rosso pair also switches around as well. As we take a look towards the differences, Bottas's lead has started to come down now to 38 points, Massa is within 26 of Button for third, and Verne is almost at the 100-point club with 11 points back to his teammate. Grosjean is in a lonely 9th place with 20 points either side of him, and Maldonado is beginning to pull away slightly from the bottom half of the field. So Williams again take home the most points and close in on the title, gaining 33 to Force India's 27. McLaren and Lotus score 10, with Toro Rosso taking 20 and Caterham 1. Again, there is no shuffling in the leaderboard at all, but as we move towards the differences, Williams now has a 49-point lead at the top. McLaren fall to 22 points back, with Toro Rosso 155 points away still. Lotus are almost at the 100-point mark on 93, with Sauber still ahead of Marussia and Caterham. As we leave Singapore and head towards round 15 at Japan. So Japan has seen some amazing racing over the years. Hunt winning the title for McLaren in Fuji, or Raikkonen's last lap pass on Fisichella in Suzuka 2005 spring to mind. It's a favourite track for many drivers on the grid. However, the race in 2014 is remembered for a different reason. Monsoon-level rain caused aquaplaning for everybody. Unfortunately for Jules Bianchi, this would be his last Formula 1 race, as he collided with a recovery truck on lap 43. He later succumbed to the injuries sustained in the crash at Japan 9 months later in hospital. His racing number 17 was retired in honour, and in this series that I've been running, his final points tally reached 17. Rest in peace, Jules. So qualifying starts us off as always for the weekend. As we jump into Q1, it sees again the alternating quartet of the Marussias and Caterhams again taking up the back row, with Bianchi ahead of Chilton and Ericsson ahead of Kobayashi. The two Lotus cars are next, with Maldonado failing to get out of Q1 once again. So Q2 opens with the two Saubers, Sutil ahead of Gutierrez, and then, like the Caterhams and Marussias before them, the Force India pair and Toro Rossos alternate, with Verne leading Perez and Kvyat leading Hulkenberg. But can anyone stop the march of Williams in qualifying at all? It is looking unlikely, as Button and Magnussen lock out the second row of the grid, with Williams again scoring a 1-2 lockout, with Bottas on pole this time. Looking at the starting grid, Verne and Maldonado both have a 10-place grid drop for the race. As we will move into that now, it had two retirements overall, Sutil in the Sauber and Jules in the Marussia. Shortly after the lap 43 incident, the race was red flagged and not restarted on lap 44. So Kobayashi, Chilton, Ericsson and Maldonado were all one lap down and out of the points when the red flag came out. Grosjean squeezed into the points for Lotus, albeit a lap down as well. Magnussen slipped back from his starting point to finish 9th, with Gutierrez in front. Kvyat is the last of the lapped finishers in 7th, with Perez in front failing to finish, but was still classified. Verne and Hulkenberg are next, with Hulk just missing out on the podium spot by 8 tenths behind Massa, who was only 1 second behind his teammate Bottas. Jenson Button won the Japanese Grand Prix by a staggering 46 seconds, ending the Williams win streak, taking his first victory since Canada in round 7. So along with the victory, Jenson Button also takes home the fastest lap of the race by well over a second from Nico Hulkenberg. So with 25 points to his name, pushes Button into the 200-point realm, with every driver in the top half of the grid scoring points. But for the first time this season, though, there were no driver shuffles in the leaderboard. Bottas's lead has increased to 44 points, almost at the 2 victories comfort mark. Button moves to within 7 points of Hulkenberg now, with Massa and Perez still fighting for 4th place. Verne is 1 point shy of 100, with Kvyat on 84, and the bottom half of the grid is all the same still from last round. So even with Button's dominant win, Williams still takes home 33 points to McLaren's 27. Force India score 20 and Toro Rosso take home 16. There is also no shuffling again for the teams either, as Williams now stretch their lead to 62 points in front of Force India. McLaren are now 19 points back and closing. Toro Rosso are now a mammoth 166 points back, with 89 between them and Lotus. Sauber are pulling clear from Marussia and Caterham, who are still at the back of the pack. As we leave the pouring rain of Japan in Suzuka and head to the brand new Russian GP at the Sochi Autodrome. As always, qualifying starts us off for the weekend, and we will jump straight into Q1, which sees Maldonado and Chilton out in 14th and 15th on the grid, with Kobayashi only 400ths clear of the Lotus. Massa in the Williams is out in Q1 for only the third time this year, as he's 4/10ths back from Ericsson. Taking a look towards Q2 now, Grosjean makes it in behind both the Sauber cars, and then both the Force India cars as well, with Hulkenberg ahead of Perez and Gutierrez ahead of Sutil. So with one Williams already out, we won't see another Williams 1-2, but it could still be a Williams pole. So Verne makes it through into 5th place, with Magnussen and Kvyat behind on the second row of the grid. Button is in P2 with Bottas on pole. It is Williams' 7th pole in a row now, and 12 out of 16 races. There are a few penalties to hand out here, with Magnussen, Hulkenberg, Chilton and Maldonado all receiving a 5-place grid drop. As we head to the first ever race around the Sochi Autodrome, a 53-lap race, let's see who will win. So Chilton and Kobayashi are the only two DNFs of the event, with Ericsson in front being 2 laps down. Then come a few 2x2s, with the 2 Lotus cars in 11th and 12th outside of the points, behind the 2 Sauber cars, who make it a double points scoring race for the team. The 2 Toro Rossos are next, with Kvyat at his home race being lapped and finishing behind his teammate. Hulkenberg is the first of the lead lap finishes, over a minute behind. Massa makes up for a poor qualifying to finish 5th, behind Perez in 4th. A double podium finish though for McLaren in 2nd and 3rd, with Button taking his 6th second place finish of the year. But it's Bottas though who takes another victory, 12 seconds ahead of the McLaren. It's the Finn's 6th win of the season. And to add to his victory, he takes home the fastest lap by over a second to Jenson Button. So adding another 25 points to his name, Bottas takes one step closer to his first ever title. Button also scores well with 18 points, as does Magnussen with 15. As we move to the shuffles, there are a few here, with Button moving to P2 ahead of Hulkenberg and Gutierrez moving past Bianchi in the lower half of the field. So with a 59-point lead over Button now in the championship, and having 3 races left to go, with 100 points up for grabs, courtesy of the double points finale, it's going to be a massive task for Jenson Button to claim his 2nd title and clear the Finn. Hulkenberg is 2 points back, with Massa now 42 points away from the German, with Perez and Magnussen 25 points, or within 25 points of him. Verne passes the 100-point mark, with Kvyat moving to within 12. Grosjean and Maldonado are in their own little world in the middle of the grid, with the Saubers now in front of the bottom 6 drivers. So Williams again take home the most points of anyone, with 35 over McLaren's 33 and Force India's 20. Toro Rosso also take 10 and Sauber 3. There are no shuffles again. As we look towards the differences, Williams move to take a 77-point lead. Again, with 3 rounds to go and 172 points available, it's going to be a hard task to overhaul for Force India, with McLaren only 6 points back. Toro Rosso are now nearly 200 points back and over 100 clear from Lotus, one of their loneliest seasons in history, sat in P4. Sauber are 19 points clear from Marussia, who are only 8 away from Caterham. So leaving the first ever Sochi Autodrome race in Russia and heading to round 17 at the United States Grand Prix in Texas for the Circuit of the Americas. So the USA, the round in which Bottas could mathematically win the World Championship, but it is unlikely. He has to win the race and have Button or Hulkenberg 6th or lower. So qualifying starts us off for the weekend. However, one thing to note, both Caterham and Marussia cars are not present due to financial issues and were unable to race this weekend. So let's jump straight to 1, which sees Grosjean in 12th with Gutierrez and Verne in front by 0.4 of a second. So looking ahead at Q2 now, Danny Kvyat just makes it in, 1/10 behind Hulkenberg in the Force India. Perez is 0.04 in front of him, with Maldonado in P6. As we move to Q3 for the USGP, Sutil actually makes it through for the first time this year for Sauber, with the two McLarens ahead with Button ahead of Magnussen. It's Williams' 8th pole in a row though, with Bottas 0.3 clear of his teammate and taking another front row lockout. So things are looking good for Bottas to win the championship in the US as Button takes a 5-place grid drop down to 7th and Hulkenberg starts 8th, behind the 5th place needed to keep the championship alive. Kvyat also takes a 10-place grid drop. So will we see a new Formula One World Champion crowned in Texas, or will the championship go one round further to Brazil? Sutil is the first of the DNF finishers, failing to convert his good qualifying results to points. Both Force Indias are also out. There is only Button left now to stop Bottas from winning the title. Kvyat and Gutierrez are next, behind Button, who finishes in P7 where he started. If Bottas wins this race, it is all over. Verne splits the two Lotus cars, with Maldonado finishing a mega P4 for the team. Magnussen gets onto the podium a full 70 seconds behind Bottas in P2, 4 seconds off his teammate Massa, who takes victory in the US, denying his teammate the chance to seal the championship here in Texas. But it is Danny Kvyat who storms to the fastest lap of the race, 0.8 clear from championship leader Valtteri Bottas. As we look towards the gains now, Bottas failed to do enough this time out to secure his first F1 title with 18 points to his name. Massa finally breaks the 200-point mark with his victory, and Maldonado scores 12. As we look towards the shuffles, Perez slips further down the order and moves behind Magnussen. So with a 71-point lead over Button and 4 points away from the title, it seems inevitable that Bottas will claim the title with Williams for this year. But this is Formula One, anything can happen. Second place is still a long way from being decided, with Hulkenberg and Massa both firmly in the fight, with Magnussen and Perez on the fringes of this battle too. Verne is 25 points clear of his teammate for best of the rest, with Grosjean heading Maldonado and Sutil leading Gutierrez. Bianchi heads the bottom half of the grid for Marussia as well. So Williams score more than double their nearest rivals with 43 points over McLaren's 21, with Lotus taking 20 and Toro Rosso 12. And after a long wait, there is finally a shift in the leaderboard, with McLaren getting past Force India for P2. As for the Constructors' title, Williams take a 105-point lead from McLaren now, with 2 races to go. All they need to do to secure their title is to finish in front of the Woking team, no matter the position, and they will claim the title. So leaving the US Grand Prix and heading towards Sao Paulo in Brazil for the penultimate round of the Formula 1.5 season for 2014. It is the race in which Bottas could become the next Formula 1 World Champion for Williams, who could also claim their first Constructors' title since 1997. As always, qualifying starts us off. There are still no Caterhams or Marussias for this weekend, and we will jump straight into Q1, which sees Maldonado qualify P12 behind Sergio Perez in 11th, who is just 300ths behind Verne's Toro Rosso, who himself is 3,000ths off of Grosjean in the Lotus. Danny Kvyat rounds off the Q1 runners in 8th place. So Q2 only has 3 participants, with Sutil in the Sauber and Hulkenberg a 10th out in front. Gutierrez is in front of both of them by nearly 4/10 for P5. So it's a familiar story again for Q3, with only the McLarens and the Williams cars left. So Magnussen starts in P4 with Button in 3rd. Championship leader Valtteri Bottas will start P2, 0.5 behind Massa, who takes a home pole position at Brazil, and Williams' 9th consecutive pole position of the season. There are a few penalties to come for the Brazilian Grand Prix, with Danny Kvyat and Sergio Perez both receiving a 7-place grid drop. So after qualifying, Williams and Valtteri Bottas are set up nicely to claim both of the championships in this round, but it could still go down to the wire in Abu Dhabi. So Grosjean is the first DNF on lap 39, followed by Sutil on lap 63. Perez squeezes into the points in P10, 1 lap down from the race winner. Gutierrez is 9th with Maldonado sandwiched between the 2 Toro Rosso cars, with Verne behind and Kvyat in front. Bottas finishes P5, dropping 3 places from his starting spot, but does enough to become the Formula 1.5 champion for 2014. Hulkenberg grabs a podium from 6th on the grid, with Magnussen behind and Button taking his 7th second place finish of the season, 7 seconds behind the race winner Felipe Massa, who takes an incredible home victory, helping to secure Williams' Constructors' title for this year. But it was Nico Hulkenberg who secured the fastest lap of the race, 2 tenths clear from Button and 3 tenths clear from Romain Grosjean. As for the gains after the Brazilian Grand Prix, Massa takes his second victory in a row, with Button closing the gap to Bottas, but not by enough. Kvyat also gains 8 points now to be within 2 of joining the 100 club, and Gutierrez secures 2 points in the battle for the teammates in 11th. There are no driver shuffles this time round, but with Valtteri Bottas 63 points clear with 1 double point finale to go, there is nothing that Jenson Button can do. But with 18 points still covering Hulkenberg and Massa, his second place spot is still not secure. Further into the midfield, the Toro Rosso, Lotus and Sauber drivers are locked in their own teammate battles for number 1 spot within the team. So looking at the constructors now, with Williams scoring 35 over McLaren's 30, Force India score 16 and Toro Rosso 12, with Lotus and Sauber scoring as well. There is still no shuffling in the constructors though, but Williams are an untouchable at the top, with second place still up for grabs, with Force India only 28 points behind McLaren. Toro Rosso are locked in 4th, with Lotus 5th for this year. Sauber move 24 points away from the bottom 2 teams. So leaving Sao Paulo now to head towards the final round of the season in Abu Dhabi. Even with the championships concluded, there is still more racing to be done and positions to be decided. But for the last time this year, qualifying will start us off, and Caterham actually managed to make a return to the grid with Will Stevens and Kobayashi as their drivers. Unfortunately though, they occupy the back row of the grid, with Gutierrez sandwiched between the 2 Lotus cars in 11th place. Q2 starts with Sutil in 9th, behind the 2 Force India cars, with Perez ahead of Hulkenberg. Verne is just 9 thousandths of a second behind 5th place man Kevin Magnussen. As we look towards the final Q3 session for 2014, it sees Jenson Button qualify 4th behind the Toro Rosso of Danny Kvyat in 3rd, equaling his best finish for the 3rd time this year. But for the final time this year, it's a Williams front row lockout for the 11th time, with Bottas taking his 10th pole of the year. So for the last race, Grosjean is the only driver to get a penalty, falling back a mammoth 20 places. As we start the final race of the season, there are double points up for grabs, so there could still be some shuffling in the order to come, but as all of the championships are decided, it will only be for a few smaller places. So with the start of the race, Danny Kvyat opens us up with a retirement on lap 14, followed by Maldonado on 26 and Kobayashi on 42. Stevens on his debut finishes a lap down in 11th, just outside of the points. The 2 Saubers are next, with Gutierrez in front of Sutil. Grosjean finishes a lap down in 8th, scoring 8 points in car number 8. Verne moves back a space from his start to finish 7th, with Magnussen in front in 6th. The 2 Force Indias are next in 4th and 5th, behind Button, who makes it onto the podium, 31 seconds behind Bottas, who finishes P2, behind his teammate Massa, who takes his 3rd victory in a row by 26 seconds around the Yas Marina circuit. Little bit of a tongue twister there. So along with the dominant race win for Felipe Massa, he also takes the last fastest lap of the race by 8 tenths of a second from Jean-Eric Verne. But with some big points on offer for the final race, Massa takes home 50, 14 more than his teammate Bottas. Unfortunately, with Kvyat's retirement though, he was unable to make it into the 100-point club, finishing on 98 points. And for one final time, there is a shuffle as Massa, thanks to his victory, moves ahead of both Hülkenberg and Button to take P2 in the standings behind his teammate for Williams. So we finished the year with Bottas on 348 points and coincidentally 67 points clear of his teammate Massa. So 67 points was the difference between Hamilton and Rosberg in the official 2014 year. Button is 2 points back in third. Hopefully with a move to Honda Power next year he can challenge the Williams pair for the title once again. Magnussen just gets into the 200 point club ahead of Perez, who finishes on 196. Then come the 2 Toro Rossos with Verne besting Kvyat, the 2 Lotus cars with Grosjean besting Maldonado, and the 2 Saubers who finish on 29 points each. Bianchi tops the bottom teams of the grid, 6 points clear of Kobayashi in the Caterham. Looking at the constructors now, Williams take nearly double the points of McLaren with 86 to their 46. Force India grab 44 points, Toro Rosso 12, Lotus 8 and Sauber 6. There are still no shuffles though for the last race of the season, and it leaves us with Williams 150 points clear of McLaren in P2, Force India 30 back in third, Toro Rosso 220 points back in fourth, Lotus 101 back in fifth, Sauber 70 points behind them in 6th, Marussia 30 away in 7th, and finally Caterham rounds off this year's runners with 20 points. And there we go, that is the end of the Formula 1.5 season for 2014. It started so well for Force India and Hülkenberg, who at one point had a 35-point lead over Valtteri Bottas, but since the summer break, Williams just kicked into gear and dominated the second half of the season. So I will aim to upload a little statsy video just compiling all of the random stats that come about, like the consecutive wins, consecutive poles, fastest laps, random occurrences, most second places, most third places, consistent qualifyings, and all of that. I'll just put a load of graphs together and just go over it, I don't know, probably in like a 20 or so minute video just talking about random stats. But equally, 2015 is in the works. I expect it to come out at some point with a similar gap between part 1 and part 2, where we can kick off where we left off, if that makes sense, kick off where we left off here, with Valtteri Bottas taking the championship and Williams taking the constructors. Let's see who can challenge them in 2015. So all I've got left to do is thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video with whatever I decide to make. I'll see you then.